welcome to Spacemen Pod. I'm Ian Edmund.
And I'm Mark Lassells.
And this time we're going to be carrying on with our chat with Mark Refoy. When we started doing this, we didn't really imagine that we would do as many parts of this interview as we've ended up doing. But it's just continually been the case where Mark's had more interesting things to say. And in particular, for this episode, we were thinking that we had done all the Spacemen 3 and Spiritualized stuff and would probably move on to talking about Mark's solo things. But he was quite keen to volunteer some stories about the recording of Pure Phase, which we didn't really mention in the previous episode. And considering this is the week where Pure Phase gets its reissue, it all tied in very nicely.
Very neat.
Yeah, that's what the majority of our chat today is going to be about.
It's certainly worth revisiting that discussion, I think, to actually get into it in a bit of a more kind of meaty fashion, really, because, well, as you will hear, there were a lot of fascinating things happening, and he played a great deal more than we perhaps gave him credit for.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I think that of the parts of the chat we've done so far, this has ended up being my favourite. There's just lots of lovely little stories, really. So we'll get
maybe revisit the album, of course, just in time for its reappearance.
Apart from that, what's been going on spaceman-wise in the world in the last few weeks? Well, there was a new interview with Jason published in Electronic Sound magazine, which is not stunningly in-depth, but quite nice. And there's a few things in there that I wasn't previously aware of. The initial copies came with a 7-inch, which was 2 of the tracks from the Pure Phase Tones for DJs single, the one which is the Pure Phase sound at various frequencies. I think that even though that only went on sale in the middle of last week from when we're recording this, I think it's going to be already a massive challenge for anyone to track down one with that free 7-inch. They vanished very, very quickly, but the magazine itself is still on sale. I'll put a link to the magazine's website on the page for the podcast, so you can investigate that if you like. Pete Bain, we'd already spoken previously about how he had a couple of dates in November supporting Lucifer Sam's. Another one's been announced in Manchester on the 13th of November. So once again, I'll put a link for where you can find details of that show. But let's get straight on and hear what we had to say with Mark about recording a Pure Phase. Well, welcome back to Mark Refoy. Thanks so much for the first parts of the interview we've done so far. Some things that occurred about the first part of our chats since then. One of the things we talked about, of course, were the bands that you'd been in before joining Spacemen 3. I think we got to 6 in the end. But looking around on a Northampton Facebook group, I think I've seen some photographic evidence that even if you weren't a full member, you might have played with at least one more act. You appear on stage with Groovy Underwear.
Oh, I did, yeah. Oh, and there was another one which I'm pretty sure you won't have heard of. There was this local Battle of the Bands kind of thing, and myself and the lads from Groovy Underwear decided to form a joke band called Cocktail Chic, and it was at the Five Bells actually in Kingsthorpe, and we did a 15-minute version of our version of A Certain Ratio Shack Up, and I think we came last, but it was a good laugh, you know. At the time, you had all these bands in the 80s who were very, I mean, fair enough. They weren't anything like our sort of like, you know, style or whatever, but they were the kind of bands that wanted to impress people, and they wanted to be the next U2 and all that sort of thing. And whereas we weren't anything like that, and we entered this competition as a bit of a joke, and I suppose we were a bit of high and mighty arseholes really ourselves, but it was a good laugh. Yeah.
Well, you certainly may, if the day comes when we try and put together our Pete Frame-esque Spacemen 3 family tree, you've made life pretty hard for us there, really. This long little trail leading down.
It's more like my family tree of bands, because it's way before Spacemen 3. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Another thing we talked about was one of the bands that you're in was the short-lived Cellar 16. And at the time, we said last time that they didn't actually release anything. That's not completely true though, because there was a compilation album.
Oh yeah, Rum
And
Punch Records. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. And so there's one track on there for Slarty Bartfast. I know they were all instrumentals, so I'm
yeah,
guessing you took your titles from whatever occurred to you at the time.
yeah. I think that's from. Is that from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
It
That's
is, and
one of the characters, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
it gives me an opportunity, if you'll indulge me, to tell one of my favourite Hitchhikers things that Douglas Adams wrote, which only appeared in a little book of scripts of the things, where he says about the character, I thought this character should be a dignified elderly man, weighed down with the burden of a secret sorrow. I wondered what this sorrow should be, and thought perhaps he might be sad about his name. So I decided to give him a name that anybody would be sad to have. I wanted it to sound as gross as it possibly could, while still being broadcastable. So I started with something that was clearly completely unbroadcastable, which was farty fuckballs, and simply played around with the syllables until I arrived at something which sounded that rude, but was almost but not quite entirely inoffensive. So there you go. If you ever
Fantastic.
go back to the to any practice sessions you did and issue a Cellar 16 album, you should retitle that one as Farty Fuckballs.
That's fantastic. I never knew that. Alan would laugh. Alan
Right.
has since passed away, but yeah.
Yes. No, you said that recently, because that was comparatively recent, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Total shocker.
But he had a studio, didn't he?
Yeah, he had One Louder Studios in Shoreditch,
Ah.
and Alan was always big time into dub reggae ever since 1981 when I first met him. And we would walk past this club in town called the Matafan Cantor, which was where it was basically all the Rastas would go and play their dub, and they'd get visiting sound systems like Jar Shaka, people like that, and you could hear the windows rattling literally from about 500 yards down the road. Or if you're in Semilong, you could hear this like distant boom, 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 boom. And when you got the nearer and nearer you got, you could hear all the windows rattling in the streets. It was fantastic. And Alan introduced me to all that. And he went on to work with Dennis Bovell and people, loads of people, Massive Attack and all that. But he was very low key. He never blew his own trumpet, and good laugh. Lovely guy, Alan. You know, God bless him. God rest him.
Yeah. Well, for once, we actually seem to be synchronizing with real world Spacemen events, because only in this week that we are talking to you, Pure Phase is getting its reissue.
Yeah, synchronicity.
Glow in the dark vinyl. And although we talked a bit about Spiritualized things last time, we didn't really talk about that album at all. And I know that there are all sorts of things involved in the making of that that you can tell us about it. So I thought we'd do that. Perhaps go through, run through the tracks and see. But if you just wondered if you had any general things, because of course, after Laser Guided Melodies, lots of touring going on, and you made the Medication single, which appears here re-recorded. How was the lead into recording?
Well, it was a bit like Laser Guided Melodies in the sense that we didn't really know that we were actually. This is the first day of us recording our new album, because we'd already recorded Medication of Bath Moles. When we'd done that, that was. Do you know what? I can't remember when that was. If that was 92 or 93 or.
Well, Medication was actually played on the Laser Guided Melodies tour. It was it was the first time I heard it. Was on the Laser Guided Melodies tour.
Oh, was it? Wow.
Yeah, at the Astoria with Verve supporting. Banker strobes going backwards and forwards along the back.
We did Medication back then.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I remember that that gig. That was a bit like Killing the Ghost, because we played with Spacemen 3 there, and I remember. No, we hadn't. Yes, we had.
No, that was Town and Country, wasn't it?
No, Town and Country.
Yeah.
We did play the Town and Country with Spiritualized, though, didn't we?
It was. Sorry, yeah, I'm completely wrong. It was Town and Country.
Yeah.
The Laser Guided Melodies tour.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember we thought we'd killed the ghost after we played there. Not that there was anything to kill, really, but I think that was the phrase that somebody said.
Well, I guess it was still early enough with Spiritualized that it wasn't quite clear which way it was going to go and how successful it would be. And if you can sell out the Town and Country, then it's obviously going all right.
Yeah, and it was with Verve, and you know they were a great band to tour with.
That was an incredible show. Another one. Well, they were all, every single one was back then.
Yeah.
So on to, why don't we go through the tracks? Obviously not going to be the order they were recorded in, but it does kick off with that re-recording of Medication. Do you remember much difference in the sort of approaches to it from the original version to the final album one?
When you say original version, do you mean, was there another recorded version?
Well, you recorded the single originally. It came out as a single on its own. And that version's probably a bit punchier, whereas on the album, which it came out so much later, I'm assuming it was a completely new session.
It's also got the kind of little Beach Boys bit at the beginning rather than at some point in the middle of the track, isn't it?
Yeah. You know what? I think that was my idea to do that bit. Yeah, I think, but I'm not 100% confident that is the case. So long ago, but I think it was.
Of course, from the off, it's imbued with that pure phase sound that stretches throughout the whole album. But I'm assuming that was a sort of studio effect that wasn't really there while you were doing the original recordings.
You have to ask Jason about that. I didn't realise that was going to be the case. I remember he said to me once, "Yeah, I'm going to do systems music," and I went, "Oh yeah, all right," thinking, I haven't got a clue what that means. Yeah, that was all Jason's part of his vision of the album as a whole. Yeah, I don't think I was aware of that particular thing that was going to happen to Pure Phase until after I'd, gone my own way.
Well, I mean, that one was something that people would have heard previously, having been out on a single, but the next one on the album after that, a real fan favourite, although it's not had too many outings, was the Slide song. What can you tell us about that?
I remember hearing it and thinking, I think Jason's got the basic ideas of it down. And we must have been there, but I remember struggling to do something on it. I presume that's the one that goes.
That's it.
Yeah, and I did that, and I remember Jason going, "Yeah, that's good. Yeah, keep that."
That is the kind of central motif of that entire song.
Yeah, and so I did that on it, and it made it kind of gave us an idea. Oh yeah, that gives a bit of sparkle, and gives it a bit of definition. And I think it helped Jason, complete it or whatever,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's turned out to be one of these songs which, amongst Spiritualized fans, is often near the top of the list of things that you'd like to hear them play, which didn't get played too much, really.
Yeah. The great thing about things like that is that it gave me like a bed to sort of like come up with stuff like that. If the chord sequence and Jason's lyrics and chords hadn't been there in the first place, then it wouldn't have given me the notion to do that, if you know what I mean.
But on the other hand, I think that some of those parts which you contributed to that, which, as I've said to you, that there were an awful lot of things on both Pure Phase and on Laser Guided Melodies, which I thought were were played by Jason, were in fact played by you. So if you take, for instance, that which is the central part of the Slide song, and then you compare it to something like the central part of Sway, I now realize that if you take those bits out, that's actually the kind of major part of the song, which was actually the part you played.
I think that Jason would do stuff which would fire my imagination, and I'd like to think vice versa as well. Even though we would never sort of sit down and go, "Hey, I loved what you did, man." It was like, yeah, I'll do that to that, and a lot of the time it was never acknowledged. It was like we do it, record it, and it was like, yeah, that'll do, that will work.
Well, it's a cohesive band, isn't it? A band that works.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that on Pure Phase. For example, I remember he had this great chord sequence. Can you hear this?
Oh yeah. Spread your wings.
Yeah.
So it's your melody line over the top, is it?
Yeah, I would put that over his. know what I mean? So I just went.
The weird thing is that I, on the Spiritualized message board, I said, oh, it's never been played live. And of course, someone said, well, what about this? And found a version, which was
Oh yeah, I heard that.
completely floored me. It's absolutely beautiful. I'd love to have heard that played live, but
Yeah,
maybe one day.
yeah, yeah.
Well, in terms of planning and getting these songs together, something which people were a bit skeptical about at the time was that Jason claimed to have spent more time working on the next song on the album, Electric Phase, and some of the others. And the reason why people were skeptical about this is because Electric Phase is just a couple of minutes of noise, really.
Yeah, I don't even remember it.
Oh, right.
Must have done it afterwards.
Well, it's possible. I know there's at least one song that was recorded after you weren't there anymore, but we'll get onto that when we reach its place. Oh, okay. So Electric Phase, not one we can say anything about, but that's followed by the spiritualized version of a Spacemen 3 song. It's followed by All of My Tears.
Ah, yeah. I don't know much about that either. Did I even play on that?
I thought that the only one you didn't play on was the re-recording of Good Times. And you would have done Good Times and Laid Back in the Sun when it first came out on that Electric Mainline single. But
Good Times, is that the one? Can you hear that?
That's it.
Yeah, that's what I did on Good Times.
Yeah.
And like, you know, chords and other stuff.
I think originally when it was done for the EP, like a lot of things were re-recorded for the album, I don't think they did a version of that until after you were gone. In fact, it appears in a very strange place on the original vinyl version of the album. It's not on its regular place, and then it appears on side 4, which looked like it wasn't going to be there. And I think that it was a last-minute decision to have another go at that. And yeah, that was with newer people after you'd gone.
I never knew that.
It's been a bit of a strange thing for the reissue, because the reissue's now been resequenced in the same order as the CD, but vinyl fans are a little unhappy that means cutting sequences that sort of run together.
Oh, like Born Never Asked into Electric Mainline.
That's
I
exactly
did read about that.
Yeah.
It is that is an odd sequence.
Well, yeah, it was odd originally because it didn't follow what was probably meant to be the proper order on the CD in the first place. It's a challenge, isn't it? You can only get so much on a side of vinyl.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about These Blues? Because there's a song that I don't know, were you involved when Jason was arranging versions of that for Spacemen 3? Because it was going to be on recurring, and it didn't happen in the end.
I remember he'd already recorded his version of that in Spacemen 3, and the Spacemen version, I did some very high, like screeing guitar. Not particularly, you know, you wouldn't listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's the sound of Mark. But I did add to that in a little way. But that song, we all loved it and still love it. But Jason agonized over that song so many times. We tried to get it right and so many times. And for some reason or other, it just never worked out. Did we ever do it live?
Oh, well, Pure Phase Tour, so that was probably after.
That was after.
I don't know. I don't think I saw it live with you playing it.
No. But I remember once in Bath Moles, me and Jason were doing a version of that. We were jamming it, just me and him. I was playing guitar, he was playing guitar, he was singing, and I thought, oh, that's pretty good. We both went upstairs when we finished, and Kate and Johnny, and I think Sean, unless he was out, but I seem to remember Kate and Johnny were just looking at us, the pair of us, wide-eyed, going, wow, that was great. And we were
doing it as the kind of tranquil, laid back version,
yeah,
obviously.
Yeah. So we said to Mike Long, and said, what was that like? And Mike, bless him, he went, oh, I didn't press record. And we went back downstairs to try and do it again. And then we came up and we said, what was that like? And their faces were completely different. They were going, no, do it again. And we could never capture that original take that we did. And so we just ended up using the band version, which doesn't really, yes, it's okay, it's good. But I think the song deserves more. you know.
It's difficult to know because, of course, we as fans, we've not heard a proper studio version of the Spacemen 3. The ones we've got are from old cassette copies. There's one
Yeah,
which was clean enough to actually get some sort of release in the end. And there's
Mhm.
another Spacemen 3 version, which I actually prefer, but we've only got a very hissy version of that. It's
That's
not
right.
really up for releasing.
yeah,
But by the time it comes out on Pure Phase, you've evolved it into that complete rocker.
Mm.
yeah,
It does have that incredible moment kind of about 2/3 of the way through, where the whole thing starts to disintegrate and it sounds like the sound really can't
yeah,
hold itself together, yet somehow goes into another phase of sounding even better than it did.
yeah. I love Sean's harmonica on it as well. That really
Yeah.
does give it a lift. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, they finally played it live. That was a major part. So
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I do like it, that particular version, but I've always thought, oh, there is this elusive version somewhere in the ether or in Jason's head of these blues. We'll never get to hear it.
After that, we've got what would have been the first sort of new Pure Phase material that many people would have heard, because it was the single "Let It Flow."
Oh yeah,
I remember being very, very taken with this. I think because of the point at which I came in, a little bit late. Things had already kicked off when I first noticed Spaceman 3 and Spiritualized, and I think that Let It Flow was the first new material that was released since
yeah,
I came out. And I was very aware that there seemed to be a bit of a shift, because it's nicely sparse. I think that's
yeah,
part of its power, really.
yeah. When we were rehearsing that song initially, yeah, my big moment was. But when it's in context, it's good. And I think, is that the one that goes? Is it that one?
Yeah, the do do
Yeah,
do.
I think it was Jason's idea to go. I think he came over to me and went, "Can you just go da dun da dun dun?" So yeah, all right. I had my guitar tuned to open G, but my bit, which I came up with in rehearsal, was just like. But when you've got it through an amp and loads of delay and stuff on it, it really does. It kicks in. I remember we used to go round and round that bit at the end, and I would just. I didn't know whether I was bored or ecstatic. Because I thought, how can I get away with just. But Jason liked it, so it was all good.
Not that I'm imagining that Jason's sitting down and giving you little lectures on his songwriting and what's going on, but I've lately come to appreciate that song even more than I did in the first place. And it's got the lovely, is that a timpani drum beat going on throughout it? It's sort of boom, boom, boom. And it was only after I'd known it for a long time that I suddenly realized that feels like it's supposed to be a heartbeat. And then towards the end, when it breaks down and the electric sound starts screeching in and it all goes very discordant, maybe I'm reading something that isn't here into it, but it struck me that the intention was that for whatever reason, perhaps overindulgence, someone's effectively heart stopped beating. And all that chaos is there while people are frantically trying to bring them back, and then suddenly the drums crash back in and there's the clarity, and I can just see the image of someone has suddenly just come back from the brink just in time.
Did Jason re-record the drumming to that with using somebody else other than Johnny?
I don't know is a short answer to that one.
I remember Johnny and Sean, and Johnny and Will as well, but since we're talking about Pure Phase, Johnny and Sean were like that. They locked in. They were brilliant. All those bits in Electric Mainline where it goes dum 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 dum. Johnny and Sean had worked all that out and themselves, and because that originally came out as a jam at the end of Shine a Light, and I remember it.
That's right.
Newcastle Riverside. We did it for the first time, and we got off stage. Actually, I digress. But this particular gig, there was a couple of Japanese fans there, come over from Japan, and after the gig, when we walked back into the dressing room, they were bowing to each one of us as we came in, and in Japanese society, the tradition of the bow as part of their customary etiquette the deeper the bow affords you the greater respect. And they were kind of like going like that as each one of us walked in. Jason walked in and they just went down like that.
Priorities.
Yeah, brilliant. And but yeah, it was that gig at Newcastle Riverside, and Shine a Light was the last song, and we did that improvised bit of thing at the end, which became Electric Mainline. I remember we all came off stage and just went, wow, what was that? That worked.
Yeah, it used to be incredible.
I was watching earlier the MTV session that you did, and that finishes with that. Well, not that it's called Electric Mainline at that time, but that goes out of Shine Light, and yeah, you can see that everyone's got it worked out there. Will talks a lot in his book about he and Johnny almost being telepathic in their complete reading of each other's playing. And,
that's right.
And as you say, Sean fitted into that as well afterwards.
Yeah, and Sean fitted in, in his own way, just as well, but in his own way. Yeah, it's amazing. We were a proper band.
Yes, yes.
You're right.
Well, after Let It Flow, there's Take Good Care of It. The first time I heard Take Good Care of It would have been, as I'm sure it was for many people, on the Spiritualized live album, the Fucked Up Inside one from the US tour.
Yeah.
I remember at the time, I know I'm a bit of a minority here because it's very popular, that album, but I remember that being the first time when I heard a new Spiritualized track, and I felt, well, it's fine, but it doesn't tell me anything that I don't already know about this band, really. It's got much the same structure and played in much the same way. And that might be why I was really very happy to hear it again on the album, because it's done in a pretty unusual way. There
was also a version that came out. First time I heard it, I think, was a free cassette on the front of the NME recorded at Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it then appeared a part of that set. And that's when there was a lot of that kind of sort of tremolo sounds and all that in it, and so totally different from the album.
But it's been very much reinvented for Pure Phase. There's the horns and the plunging bass, and there's lots of space in there.
Is this Take Your Time?
No, it's you got a whole lot of love.
Oh yeah. Oh, fantastic! Dun dun dun. Yeah. To give Jason his credit, he came over to me and he went, "Yeah, can you go dun dun dun?" So I did that at his behest. I love that song. That's brilliant. Yeah,
beautiful song.
Yeah. That really, we used to use it as an opener. I think it might have been the opener at Glastonbury. One of the times we played Glastonbury.
Yeah, I was at Glastonbury in '92 and '93.
You were both of those, yeah?
Yeah, I saw both of those. So it was one of the afternoon with the classic moment of the biplane going over at the most perfect moment, which somebody captures on that video. They zoom in on it, which I can remember that. It was, and then '93 was that was the evening performance, so it was a much kind of heavier set. But
yeah,
both phenomenal.
So do you remember with Take Good Care of It, the recording of the album version, because it's so different, it's slowed down and more spaces in there?
Do you know what? I don't really remember it. I much prefer the version that we did live.
Got some balls, isn't it?
Yeah. It's on, as you say, Fucked Up Inside, isn't it?
Yeah.
I much prefer.
I think it's the opener on that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, that was my contribution, which was initially Jason's idea to do this which is like a variation on a theme almost,
Yeah. Well, that's the halfway breakthrough the album. After that, it does come back with the cover of Born Never Asked.
It was my idea to do that. I suggested let's cover Born Never Asked. Laurie Anderson is just massive, and that album. Well, just amazing. And I'd worked out just for the hell of it, for my own benefit, the dun 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 dun. And I think I said, wouldn't it be good if we did that on guitars? And everybody agreed. So we did it.
Was it only ever the intention to do an instrumental version of it?
Yes, yeah. Oh, of course, there's lyrics, isn't there?
There are on her version. Yeah.
More like a homage, really.
Yeah.
Than actually saying this is a definitive cover of Born Never Asked, because there's none of her lyrics on it. So it's more like a tipping of the hat, so to speak.
And that then plunges into the long album version of Electric Mainline.
Yeah.
When you're recording a long rocker, I know it's a bit of an ordeal. I mean, Will talked about trying to play the bass on Suicide never being much fun, but when it's going on at that pace, you can get into it and you can really, keep yourself going for that. Is it a bit more of a challenge when you got something as gentle as Electric Mainline to maintain it for the length that it was on that album?
In the studio, yeah, definitely. I distinctly remember doing my. This is the guitar I used, by the way, on Pure Faith. I did this. Can you hear that?
Yep.
And I remember they left me and Mike Long. Mike Long was the engineer. I think it might have been Jason said, "Oh, are you going to do your line to Electric Mainline?" And I said, "Yeah." And I think this was in the early days of computer recording. We had all the tapes struck to SMPTE timecode so that it would be in sync with a computer. He might have been using a basic version of Logic. I can't remember. I knew nothing about computers in those days. But I do know that we had SMPTE timecode, and I remember they said, "Oh, do you just want to record it once and then just print it?" And I went, "No, I'll record it all the way through." And to do that one riff all the way through, and then there's tempo changes where it gets a bit faster, I think, and I had to adjust to that as it was going along, generated by the SMPTE timecode. And I remember thinking, "Oh, fucking hell, I'll never do this." But I did, so.
It's always been a good live song as well, but I've never quite as taken when it's done live. It's one of these songs that Jason tends to get to speed up towards the end. And that's fine. Maybe it suits a live experience better, but on record, I'm quite happy with something which, once it's kicked in, you know what you're going to get,
Yeah.
And the experience is from that repetition rather necessarily than any variety in it.
Because there's two tempo versions, isn't there? There's one that's half speed or something, and then.
But it was first released two different versions on the Electric Mainline EP,
Yeah.
and then the one on the album is different again from both of them. But yeah, all around the same idea and the same sort of phrasing with slight differences.
Yeah.
It's got to be so worth the fact that you did that, played it all the way through, because when you've got these things which are effectively repeated for a long time, it's the tiny little differences that I think your mind latches onto.
Yeah. Even when I think Jason comes in with a little vocal thing, doesn't he?
Oh, that's a vocal. I know the sound you mean. Yes, it is. It's because it's sort of humming, isn't it?
Yeah, and because you've been listening to that for so long, it's like, oh, what a fantastic vocal take, but it's going, something like that. But it's, as you say, it's just those little touches which make it so good. In going back to that EP that you just mentioned,
yeah,
I would play like the slow version and think, "Oh yeah, I'm into this. Yeah, I prefer this one." Then I'd flip it over and play the faster one and think, "Oh no, this is it." And to this day, I love them both.
Yeah.
Well, there were different interpretations. I mean, if you take the album version, compare it to the way, for instance, there was that Glastonbury '92 compilation with loads of different bands on, and there's a Spiritualized version of that on it, which is where at the end it's going absolute full pelt as the pace just gets faster and faster and faster, and it builds up to this big climax. And then later on, a couple of years later, he would just make the end heavier so that when Damon was on drums, there'd be all those crashing cymbals and stuff, but rather than the pace kind of taking off, it would just be the intensity. So he had just different ways of looking at it, obviously. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In some of the instrumentation, I think I can hear things which sound like they're from the later instrumental tracks on Autobahn.
Yeah, well, we all loved Kraftwerk, particularly that era. Jackson actually, he went to see Kraftwerk and he managed to get a copy of "Feel So Sad," and he feels so sad, and he put it into Florian's hands. And if I remember rightly, Jason said he was thinking, he's not going to like this, it's nothing. But I love them, and here's a copy of my band "Feel So," that single on Dedicated.
Yeah.
And I think Florian said something like, "Oh, thank you. We'll listen to this on the tour bus." Obviously, we heard nothing back. But it's just the fact that he simply put it into Florian's hands
That was enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It is enough, isn't it? They weren't exactly talkative about this sort of thing, so probably weren't expecting a fan letter back. But that's a great story, though, isn't it? Yeah, and it would have been on that same EP with those 2 instrumental versions that were the first time that we heard versions of Good Times and Lay Back in the Sun, which very much sort of feel like 2 parts of the same work to me. Maybe it's just that they were released together because they sound very different, but it feels like the same ambience.
Lay Back in the Sun. Do you know what? I don't think I was involved with that. Oh yeah, wasn't that on the Greenpeace?
Oh yes, there was a version on that 7-inch.
Yeah.
Greenpeace had forgotten about that. Yes,
been on it. I've got very little memory of that track. I must have played on it, but maybe I didn't. I don't know. I've got very little memory. They had a club downstairs at Moles, and a lot of the time we'd be recording into the night, and there'd be a banging club night going on downstairs, and this Jazz Jamaica, this group were playing one night, and we got wind of the fact that Rico Rodriguez was playing with them, and fair play to Jason. He said, I want to get them on the album. I want to get them playing on the tracks. And we could see from looking down from upstairs, their van arrive, and we saw them arrive, and we were going, oh, they're here, Jason, they're here. And we were kind of like thinking, who's going to ask them? Who's going to ask them? And Jason, fair play to him, he went downstairs, spoke to the Jazz Jamaica manager, and he had to have the 2 other guys playing, was it clarinet and flute or something? If he was going to use Rico, then he had to use the 2 other guys, which was, brilliant. So the other musicians who played on that, I can't remember which song it was that they played on.
I think it's Take Good Care of It for the trumpet.
Yeah. Oh yeah, trumpet, and Rico's trombone.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember meeting them in this like relaxation room with a TV and that. And Rico pulled out this massive bag of grass, and he was telling us about this the times when he was doing session work in Jamaica, where the session fees for his work weren't enough to cover the taxi ride to the studio. But I couldn't understand a word he was saying because his patois was so impenetrable. But somebody else was translating it. He was their manager, I think, and he's saying that the taxi fare was so, and all the time he's rolling this massive, humongous split. What a legend! And his trombone was actually sometimes out of tune, but it wasn't. It was the sound of Rico, Well, not out of tune. It was just his style, the way he played. So full of character, brilliant. And so yeah, down to Jason about that. Another little thing about Pure Phase, there used to be this office studio manager lady called Jan, and me and Johnny were talking to her, and this girl walked down the stairs, and Jan said, "Do you know who that was?" And he said, "No." She said, "That's Gillian at a New Order. She's just borrowed some of your cymbals." And Johnny went, "Oh, right. Thanks for asking." So about 3 or 4 days later, me and Johnny went to Real World Studios in Box to pick up his cymbals because Steve Morris had borrowed them. Oh, what the fuck is Steve Morris borrowing Johnny's cruddy old cymbals for? Surely he's got like wardrobes full of cymbals. So we went down there, and this studio like technician came out, and we said, "Yeah, what do you want?" He said, "Oh, we just come to collect cymbals, New Order borrowed them off Johnny." And he went, "Oh yeah, okay." So we waited in this like room, and there was this old boy in there, and he was watching something or other on the telly, and I just went, "All right, mate, what's on the TV?" And he went, "Oh, I don't know, cricket or something." Went, "All right, yeah." It was only later I realised that was Rob Gretton. And I don't know why I didn't recognise him. And then a few minutes later, this guy came out, and he had Johnny's cymbals and stuff. And he said, we could hear all this mank laughter going on. He said, "Do you want to come in and say hello?" And we went, we were arseholes. We just went, "Nah, see ya." And I think, what a fucking twat. They were my ultimate favourite band. But I genuinely thought, nah, I can't be bothered.
I mean, considering that following you on Twitter these days is largely a retweeting the history of New Order and
Yeah,
everything they do.
yeah, yeah, bonkers. I emailed Steve Morris and I reminded him of this, and he went, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Did he ever get them back?" Fantastic.
Well, after Good Times on Pure Phase, it goes into the track Pure Phase, which I don't know if there's much playing on that at all. It's really just a sound effect. So, and then we talked a little bit already about Spread Your Wings.
Mhm.
And then things get rounded off with Feels Like Going Home.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Cracking end.
That's another one which,
Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the last two tracks on that album are
yeah,
kind of as good as anything that Jason did post Spacemen 3.
yeah.
I don't know if any of you remember when Simon Bates on Radio 1 used to have his various features there. There was one feature he did which every day had a little bit of background music, which drove me mad because we were working in an office that had Radio 1 all the way on. And
Some
it's just
sentimental story.
yeah, well, there was that thing when he had his Our Tune, which had some particular
Our Tune,
orchestral
that's it.
thing. But there was another feature he
Yeah.
had. I can't remember what the feature was now, but it had this backing music. I was going, look, I know this really well, but the context was so different that I couldn't connect it up. And then it suddenly occurred to me that it was do 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 do, and
Yeah,
it was yeah.
yeah.
Had he actually used it?
Yeah, it was just being looped in the background. I mean, presumably it was a producer's choice or whatever. But there you go, a little bit of Pure Phase instrumental from those last tracks being looped around, and people on Radio 1 listening to them every day.
Who's playing the strings on those songs?
That is.
Absolutely beautifully playing on Feels Like Going Home. I mean,
should
really stunning. I was listening to it yesterday, and it reminded me of how lovely it is.
Do you know what? I can't remember. I know that kick horns are all over Pure Phase, but who plays the strings? I don't know. I don't know. Actually, this is backtracking a bit because I remember we recorded some of 200 bars in Bath, Moles, and we got this session musician, accordion player, woman to come in, and she was, I wouldn't say elderly, but she was definitely older than us, you know, by a margin, probably in her 40s or 50s at the time. And she was like a session player that we got from the Musicians Union or whatever in the local Bath area. And she came in and Jason played her the track. And he said, yeah, what I want you to do is dun 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 dun. So she played along to it and she went, well, I can't do that. Why not? She said, well, it's syncopation. I can't do that. Well, you know, just do it like dun 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 dun. She said, I can't do it. So me and Jason had to. I can't remember which one of us was pressing the keys and which one of us was pressing the little black buttons. But as she was pushing the bellows, one of us was doing the chords and the black button. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I don't know if she ended up getting paid.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah, that was in Bath Moles, and I've got a very distinct memory of that being in Bath Moles. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm
No,
sure.
some of it was done there.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. That was definitely Bath Moles. Yeah, going back to Feels Like Going Home, I remember Jason asked me to play guitar through his Vox head of his amp. And or I might have asked him because it had this great sound. It's great, and I did all that. You know, at the end, the tail out.
Stuart Gordon violin. Does that sound right, or would it be one of the Balanescu lot?
Balanescu lot. There, maybe. Now I wasn't there. I never met any of the Balanescu lot, even though I'd suggested that, you know. I think Jason got the idea from me. Well, from me having that CD, you know. No, I didn't meet any of them lot. I remember years later, I was in Pet Shop Boys, and we'd done was it our first? It was on the first tour that I did with them in sometime in March or February or March '02. and it was at Stoke University. And on the way there, Neil Tennant said, "Oh, Johnny Marr and John Savage are coming tonight." And I remember thinking, "Oh fuck, no pressure then." And I just forgot about that. When you get into the whole, thing of playing a gig and sound check, doing the gig, you just forget things like that. And halfway through the gig, a lot of the power went down. You could only hear the guitars. And the
Pet Shop Boys gig, yeah.
It's me and Vic playing guitars. So that was a bit of a disaster from their point of view. But we're in the dressing room afterwards, and I was just sitting down, just relaxing, and the door opened, and it was one of these like big, almost like some like lecture room. And this guy walked in, and I was sure it was one of the Oasis guys, one of the brothers, Noel or Liam. But I wear glasses, so I couldn't really make him out. But he started walking towards us, and then he started walking right up to me. And as soon as he came up to me, and he was in eyesight, I realised in a millisecond it was Johnny Marr. And he went, "All right, Matt, fucking great that." And I went, "Oh, thanks, Johnny." And he sat down next to me, and he went, the first thing he said was, "Did you play on Pure Phase?" And I went, yeah, fucking great album, that, brilliant." And I went, "Oh, right, yeah, thanks." And then I asked him about electronic, and on one of their albums, I'm sure they use a Can sample of Mother Sky for the beginning, the first few seconds of this track. And I went, "Did you use Mother Sky, sample of Mother Sky for, I forget the name of the track?" And he went, "Dunno." And we then chatted for about, it must have been for about an hour. Wow. And I never once asked him about the Smiths. So yeah, he's a big Pure Phase fan.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think I told you I was lucky enough to see him a couple of years ago with my youngest, who's become quite a guitar enthusiast, and he played 5 Smiths songs there. So it's good to have an outlet where you can still enjoy the Smiths these days.
Yeah.
And he played those early electronic singles as well.
Yeah, he does a great version of "Getting Away with It," where he breaks down into this almost a spiritualized segment, where he does this fantastic guitar bit. I saw him do it at the Roadmender here a few years ago. Yeah, wow. Yeah. I have to say that I have to add to the whole Pure Phase thing that I was very unhappy for a lot of the time in Bath Moles. I remember there were times when Jason would spend an inordinate amount of time getting a cymbal sound right, and at the time I was so impatient, and I couldn't see the sense in a lot of the things that he was doing. But obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, he was doing what he had to do. But I would get so frustrated. I remember going to the pub downstairs opposite Bath Moles on my own, and just drinking, just to get away from the atmosphere. And I remember Jason coming down and saying, "Do you realise that there's people who like us as much as you like, and he said, whoever you like, your heroes, like Joy Division or whatever." And I went, well, I did know that, but you kind of lose sight of that sort of thing. And I think Jason was trying to rekindle some of my initial enthusiasm, which, I still did have, but I was very frustrated. And I think in those months that we were in Bath Moles, that must have set the notion in his head of like, I can't play with people who are unhappy in the band.
So was it more a case then of it just being the time that things were taking rather than anything musically in the band that you started feeling unhappy about?
Yeah, it's just, there were little things when you look back at them now, but we were in Moles in December, maybe it was November and December of 93, was it, or 92? No, 92. And we were there right up, Jason wanted us there right up until Christmas Eve. And obviously we wanted to get home, be with our families, get stuff, for them. And I left early. I think I left early on Christmas Eve, got on this massive mental train journey. Eventually got back home, in late Christmas Eve. And I thought, you know, this is, that was one of the things that, and I found out that Jason was pissed off that I didn't go to the studio on Christmas Eve. But you know, fair enough. He had to do what he was doing at the time. He was, you know, Spiritualized was very much his vision, and
of course. I mean, had you already been writing stuff for yourself in the meantime?
I'd always been writing stuff, and me and Johnny went to this local studio in Northampton, and we recorded a couple of songs. I think one of them eventually became Sundown, the first Slipstream single. But I had no idea what was going to happen to this songs that I was recording. I just needed an outlet from my duties in Spiritualized. I think I was frustrated that stuff that I presented to Jason wouldn't be used in the way that I would perceive it to be used. So that's why I was doing my own stuff. And I didn't tell Jason, you know, oh, I'm going to a studio to record my own songs. So there, because it wasn't like that at all. But Johnny went round to see Jason and Kate for some, you know, some social reason or whatever. And to use Jason's words, Johnny let the cat out of the bag. Whereas Johnny wouldn't have been saying it like that. But Jason was very annoyed that I'd done that. So he called me and he said, you know, what do you think you're doing? You know, you're spending your money you can't afford, doing your own songs, you know, and you should be, you know, devoting everything to Spiritualized, blah, 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 blah. You know, he did have a point, but at the same time, I was saying, you know, I still want to be in Spiritualized, but, you know, I'm just doing my own stuff on the sideline. I've always done it. And but he didn't like that.
So after that parting with Jason, you'd already been demoing a few things, and it came to the attention of Shay Trading Records.
Yeah, I'd sent out a cassette of the demos that me and Johnny had done at that studio. I think it had inadvertently ended up on somebody's desk somewhere, and somebody from Shay, might have been Neil, or not Neil, what's his name, Nick or Vanita, just saw on the desk in some record company, Slipstream. Oh, no, it wasn't Slipstream, because I didn't have a name for the band. Just said Mark Refoy. And they went, oh, that's the guy from Spiritualized. So they took it, and it all went from there. And they were the ones who said, yeah, we'd like to put a single out, and you've got to have a band name, and we've got you a couple of little gigs in London or whatever.
Did you not already know Vanita at all? Because of course she'd been at school with Kate.
That's right. Yeah. No. Maybe I had met Vanita before. Can't remember.
Well, I guess it was what encouraged her to grab hold of it then, if she was aware who you were. So you got that set up from them, but as you just said, you didn't have a name. So how did you come up with that?
I didn't want to have the band like being like my name, because that just was too much like a solo thing, and I was like, oh, I don't want that. And so I just went through my record collection, and we used to listen to a lot of Van Morrison at the time, you know, Moondance, Astral Weeks and that. And I had this album of his called Poetic Champions Composed. There's a song on it called Queen of the Slipstream, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's Slipstream. I made a mental note of the word. And I was going through the albums, and I came across Astral Weeks, and there's the lyrics, if I ventured in the slipstream between the viaduct of your dreams, blah, blah, blah. I thought, slipstream, that would do. I don't think I had an epiphany. It wasn't like, slipstream, yes. It was like, yeah, that would do. So, and I had no idea. It didn't occur to me at all that the definition of a slipstream is something that gains its momentum from the wake of something bigger. And that completely escaped me. But in a way, it's quite apt, really.
But it's interesting how some of these names just come because the pressure is on and you've got to come up with something so that it can be used.
That's right.
I mean, Nirvana ended up having to pay a big chunk of money to a band who were already called Nirvana for a name that they didn't even really like very much.
That's right, yeah. They were a bunch of sort of like hippies, weren't they?
Yeah, sort of psych folk type thing.
That's right. Yeah. I've forgotten all about that.
I guess it depends how successful you become as to whether people will come after you for a
Yeah.
chunk of a chunk of the money there.
Yeah. I think there's subsequently there's about 20 different slipstreams all over the world.
Yeah.
But I think I remember specifically asking Shay, there was a guy called Chris Kaz who worked at Shay at the time, and they had this kind of like primitive computer database of everything that had ever been released at the time. And I said, can you check that there's any other slipstreams? And there was some kind of one-off dance techno release by somebody called Slipstream. And I think Chris got in touch with them and said, you know, are there any problems with this band having the name Slipstream? And but apparently this thing wasn't a viable entity anymore.
Yeah.
So we were okay to go ahead with it.
It must have been so difficult in the pre-internet days. Now you could just search for whatever's out there straight away.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times I've thought of a great band name and to what I thought was a great band name, Googled it, fuck.
Yeah. Next time, hopefully, we'll be talking to you a lot more about slipstream things. But we've already talked last time about how the first song on the first Slipstream album, Harmony, evolved out of a song that you had helped to write and were performing with Spiritualized. We had a comment from someone who listened to that episode on YouTube, who says, this is a comment from Gemma Dora, who says, re the track initially called Colleen, then Girl, that Mark talks about. Colleen could possibly be named after Colleen Maloney, who worked during press at Dedicated Records in the early 90s. Colleen was from Cork, Kinary. She later ran the PR department at 4AD Records, then Beggars Banquet, and has run the publicity for Domino Records for the past 15 years. A wonderful person. So, coincidence?
Colleen, fantastic girl. Brilliant. She was doing all the press with the guy called Neil McGinley at Dedicated. And yeah, brilliant. I haven't spoken to her in a long time, but she was always really supportive of us. But no, I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, it was named after her.
Oh, well, there you go, Gemma. You have your answer. Just a name that was floating about in the background, not a direct influence.
Colleen phoned me up. She was at would have been in the last 5 years or so, and she was at a Spiritualized gig in London. Sorry, she didn't phone me up. She texted me, and I've never had a text from Colleen. I've had a number for God knows how long, but we don't have, you know, a text relationship. And she texted me just to say, "Oh, I'm at a Spiritualized gig, and it's great, but it's just not the same as when you and Johnny and all that."
Do I recall, Mark, reading something that you said some years ago now when you went to a Spiritualized gig and ended up going backstage and chatting to Jason?
There's a great story behind that. I was flying back from Bangkok with Pet Shop Boys, and we got to Heathrow, I think it was, and I was coming down some escalator going to pick up my baggage or whatever, and I thought, that looks like Jason in the distance. That can't be. Anyway, got my bag, went to arrivals where they arranged for a cab to me for me to pick me up or whatever, and there was Jason waiting in the same area, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned around and he went, "Oh, Mark!" Put his arms around me, and he said, "I saw your name being held up, and I just wanted to wait and say hello." And I was blown away.
Oh,
yeah,
that's nice.
You know, and he said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I just got come back from Bangkok." And he went, "Wow, you're looking pretty good, seeing as you've just spent some time in Bangkok." And he went, "Yeah, we've just come back from there as well." And I went, "Ah, you must have been on the same flight then." He must have been in economy, and I was in business. I didn't say that, but it did make me laugh.
That's brilliant.
I said something like, "Oh yeah, we'll have to hook up," saying, like, you know, say hello and that. And he said, "Yeah, do." But I think we both realised that none of us was going to actually go through with that. It was almost like exchanging pleasantries.
Yeah.
But you know, about a short time after that, my mate Craig Wagstaff, the Dark Side guy, we spoke, and he said, "I'm going to see Spiritualized, the Electric Ballroom. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So went down, And it was the first time I'd ever, oh no, I had seen Spiritualized before, but I was blind drunk, and I don't really remember it. That was at the Reading Festival, and I'd seen them in a tent after I'd seen New Order. So I was in no fit state to appreciate Spiritualized. So the first time I saw them in my eyes properly was at the Electric Ballroom. And
which year was that?
That was 2004. I think it was 2004. I think whatever song, Lord Let It Rain on Me, whatever album that was on, I think that was the album he was touring.
Yeah, it's 2004ish. It's Amazing Grace time, isn't it? Yeah.
And Paddy was doing the lights, so it was a bit like old days, but it was very weird. When I was in Spiritualized, I had a dream that one day I would be watching them. And I remember waking up from the dream thinking, what the fuck's all that about? I'll never be watching Spiritualized because I'm in them. Anyway, it was halfway through this gig, I thought, fuck, this is my dream. Anyway, I met them afterwards, and weirdly enough, I didn't have a backstage pass. And Craig was already backstage. We somehow got separated during the gig. And but I was with Paddy, the lighting guy, and he was saying to this security guy, he's got to come backstage. He was one of the original members, the guitarist. So the security guy went, all right then. That ever happened. And
you got enough bravado, you can bluff anyone in.
Yeah. So yeah, I went to see them, and it was great. I had a good laugh with Jason, and he was gracious, and he was joking as ever. He was saying, in reference to his band, he was saying, "Oh, these lot, well, they don't know what it's like, you know what it's like to be in a real touring band." And I haven't drank in 20 odd years, and I'd been sober for about 3 or 4 years at that gig. And Jason said, do you want a drink? And I said, yeah, you got any juice or anything? He said, oh yeah, you don't drink, do you? And I thought, oh yeah, I wonder how he got information. But it was brilliant. It was great.
I mean, they were such a different prospect as a band by that time. They transformed their sound a lot that I guess it's not like you're having to watch someone impersonate what you were doing.
No, they were really good. I enjoyed that gig. It was great.
Yeah, I remember that tour. They were on form. I mean, it's an album which divides fans a bit. But I remember whatever people were thinking of the album, that was a really good time live. And in fact, that was a pretty amazing Electric Mainline on that tour, I remember. And I didn't know at the time about who would be involved in things like lighting. But now the fact that you say it was Paddy, I remember that so clearly, that when Electric Mainline kicked in and the banks of lights just all came stunningly on at once. And also they kept the pace much the same throughout as well, without the speeding up. The thing that I didn't like about it, it was amazing. It was very good show.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, oh, this is good, these lot are great. I was kind of like removed from the fact that I was once on the stage, which was a good thing, you know.
Well, Mark, thank you very much. That has been a great discussion, and you're so generous with your time and your stories for us. Hopefully we will be back before too much longer to get stuck into your solo stuff, which is quite an extensive career now, which it's fair to say that Mark and I have both been enjoying an awful lot lately, and discovering things which have surprised us, really, especially on the most couple of recent albums. I think it's going from strength to strength. Probably a good point to mention to anyone who hasn't come across this. As we were talking about near the beginning of the chat, that you've just put out a new song which people can get from Bandcamp. Please check that out, people. I'll put a link next
to worthwhile.
Yeah, no, it's lovely, isn't it? I'll put a link next to wherever you found this episode, or on our website. But until next time, thank you very much. That's been wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you. Cheers.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I think that's my favourite part of the interview so far. Lots of lovely little stories, and
That's so interesting.
yeah, I think it's worth pointing out, as we were saying, chatting to Mark after we finished the recording, of how proud he is of all the time he spent in Spacemen 3 and Spiritualized, and he's extremely proud of the records they made, and I hope that's reflected in a lot of the stories that are told there.
I think also both those albums, the first Spiritualized album, when you listen to what Mark is saying about, and then when you listen to a bit of Slipstream afterwards, you realize he was absolutely central to so many of those songs. So many of those guitar motifs came from him. And I think he was perhaps more creative than people gave him credit for. And I've certainly come away with a great deal more respect for him than I had before, which was considerable anyway.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. I mean, there's no one's ever going to displace Jason from being the central
Of
creative
course, it's
force
not.
in the whole band. And as Mark said a few times in the interview, he needed to have his chord structures, his lyrics, everything in place beforehand, so that there was something for the rest of them to riff on. It's come together so wonderfully, especially on those albums. I mean, not dismissing the later ones, but I think many of us have those ones as our favorites, and this has really helped us understand
Yeah,
why.
yeah.
Of course, I went away and listened to Pure Phase a lot more after we'd had that chat. And I think that some of the songs that Mark says, oh, I don't remember playing on that, I think it's possible that some of them don't actually have any guitars on them. The versions of All of My Tears and Take Good Care of It, those wonderfully atmospheric ones, there's
Yeah,
lots of bass and strings and things on them.
and a great deal of production.
Yeah, but I'm not actually sure that there are guitar parts, or if they are, they're very subtle. So it may well be the case that he wasn't taking part in them anyway. And the story that Mark wasn't previously aware of about the re-recorded version of Good Times not being on the original Pure Phase track list. And maybe this is why it appeared on the side 4 of the vinyl as a bit of an afterthought, even
Yeah,
though it was sequenced in there on the CD. I mean, I'd forgotten that it's not even included on the track list on the back of the vinyl album, even though it did end
that's
up on
right.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, although it's in its right place on the CD. And curiously, if you were to buy, as I may have suggested to my children for Father's Day, which is only a few days away, if you were to buy a Pure Face t-shirt from the Spiritualized website, they've used the version of the track listing from that original vinyl album. It still doesn't have Good Times on it.
I hadn't spotted that.
Yeah, no, it was only because I was looking out for it after this.
You're more eagle-eyed than I am, Ian.
And I'm glad that a few people have been talking about Pure Phase at various places recently. It's enabled me to get a few other things that I said in the interview a bit more straightened out. A chap called Andrew McCulloch has written a nice piece about when he was pitching a book to the 33 and a third series, little mini books about makings of albums. He pitched them one for Pure Phase, which they didn't take up in the end, but he's published the sample chapter he sent, which was all about the last track about Feels Like Going Home. And one of the things he included there was that when I was saying in the interview that there was a Simon Bates sing on Radio 1 that had looped the strings
Oh,
from the
yeah,
beginning
that's
of
right.
that track. Turns out that it was Nicky Campbell. It would have been a bit strange if Simon Bates had two similar features about breakup and heartbreak scenarios along with our tune. But at least I was right to remember that there was a Radio 1 program that was looping those strings. It just took ages for me to place where they come from because it was so out of context and didn't go into the rest of it. Another thing that we should mention is Mark talks near the end of the interview about not meeting anyone from the Banalescu quartet, even though he had that CD, he said. Well, that's a story that we were chatting about before we started recording and then forgot to do in the main interview, in that Mark had a Banalescu quartet CD of an album called Possessed, where most of it is made up of Kraftwerk covers, which he'd then given to Jason. And obviously Jason liked it enough to ask them to take part. So that explains what Mark means when he says, even though I had that CD. It looks like an interesting disc. I haven't got that, but I've got it on order now. So yeah, looking forward to that. And also I finally worked out which Kraftwerk song there was a bit of Electric Mainline that reminded me of. Of the two versions on the original Electric Mainline EP, the second one, the slightly slower one, there's a bit of piano in that, and in the middle of Comment and Melody 1 on Autobahn, there's a little piano feature, and I remember the first time I heard it, only having gotten into Kraftwerk much more recently than listening to Spiritualized, it immediately started, oh, that sounds a little bit like that.
Mhm.
It's only influence, it doesn't have the same melody or anything, but it's a nice similar feel. In fact, going back to that electronic sound interview that we mentioned earlier, I don't want to go into much of the details because it's a current magazine, and I think it's only fair that people try and track it down for themselves and buy it if they can. But slightly more than Mark said, because of course he mentioned that Jason had given Florian a copy of Feel So Sad. In the electronic sound interview, Jason says that he wanted Ralph and Florian to mix laser guided melodies and that they seemed interested, but they didn't follow
Would
it
have been
up.
interesting.
If he seems to indicate that he didn't follow it up through shyness more than anything, which I guess you can understand. We've all got our heroes, and it must be a bit intimidating to try and approach Kraftwerk to do something like that. We're going to talk finally, I hope, about Slipstream and Mark's other work when we chat to him next time. But it's worth saying right now that there's a new Slipstream song available on Bandcamp.
There is.
Yours for £1, although I think you can probably stream most of it anyway. You get higher quality download options. So
Certainly worth a quid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's lovely. Other than that, it has been gloriously sunny in the last few days here, and
It certainly
I think
has.
we've been taking advantage and listening to summer sounds.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, what have you been enjoying?
Well, it was after our conversation about Spacemen 3's I Love You last week, I went back to some of those Marley tunes because Pete Kember's obviously a very big Lee Perry fan, and those happen to be some of the tunes which Lee Perry worked when he worked with Bob Marley. And so I went back and played a whole load of those, and then I found myself playing a lot of other Lee Perry stuff. I'm sure that a few people are familiar with the wonderful Congos album, which for me is probably the greatest reggae album that I've ever heard, even though it's not a dub album as such. It's incredibly psychedelic. The whole thing has got that key Lee Perry kind of whooshing underwater sound throughout the whole thing, and that sounds remarkable on a good sunny afternoon, I have to say. Not like things like Lee Perry's Black Ark in dub, which I've never really found as a very sunny record. That's a very late night, dark, rude type of record. So yeah, head for the Congos rather than the Black Ark, I think. But no, a lot of reggae being heard in our house. Also, something which always comes out when it's really hot weather is a very obscure kind of acid psych album from 1976 called Relatively Clean Rivers, put together by a guy called Phil Pearlman on his own Pacific Is label. It's now, I think I saw a copy sold for $2,500 about a month ago. You can get reissues, even those are very hard to get hold of. But for me, this is the best hot weather album I know of. It positively crackles with heat. You can almost kind of see the sort of rippling mirage come off the vinyl as you play it. And again, this is one for a very hot afternoon. Again, easily found on YouTube. It's only about 35 minutes, but it's every second is worthwhile on that record. So every day it gets particularly hot. Indeed, like yesterday, that album is always played here. You've
been recommending that to me for a while, and I finally had the opportunity when it was very hot yesterday to give it a go. I'm never going to be completely taken, I think, by the country stuff as well, much as you are. But I did, after my initial slight skepticism at the beginning, find it really quite enjoyable. In fact, as it went on, I was enjoying it more and more, and I especially the instrumental passages, when the flute cuts in particular. I thought that was really nice. There's a bit of a false ending at one point.
There is on some of it. It sounds almost kind of clumsy at times, but I think this just kind of adds to the overall charm.
I thought it had finished at one point, and then there's a couple of little. Suddenly, there's these two sound effects, and they're quite spaced out as well. After when I heard the first one, I thought, oh, did I hear that? And then another one comes in. But no, I thought it was very pleasant, and maybe I should give it a bit more of a chance, and may end up being more seduced by it.
Yeah, if anyone comes across a copy at a car boot sale, that's certainly one of the nuggets to keep an eye out for. One of the
You
most
are
valuable records of its time.
obviously quids in if that happens. I don't feel guilty on this occasion getting it off YouTube, since it seems that coming across a copy is not going to be the easiest thing to do.
Well, I mean, they did some reissues, but they were all regarded as bootlegs, and so they've been withdrawn from sale. I mean, you can occasionally find those, but yeah, the idea of having to stump up for an original copy is perhaps not very realistic, I don't think.
My only summer concession to summer has been to go back and listen to the Electric Mainline EP a bit in preparation for after the interview, because we've got Lay Back in the Sun there, and the whole thing just felt like it was completely summery, which is a bit ironic considering it came out in, I think, October of 1983. In fact, of course, I realise it's another thing I said during the interview, which isn't really correct, because I said to Mark about how Take Good Care of It would be the first new material we'd heard. Well, of course, Lay Back in the Sun and Good Times, Electric Mainline, all of those were on that EP, you know, over a year earlier than that. But I think it's wonderful. I think the versions on that Electric Mainline EP of all of the tracks are my favourite ones. I think in context of Pure Phase, it does make sense to have re-recorded them. I think they fit in more with the atmosphere of the album in those re-recorded versions. But I just love the originals. A bit more lo-fi, really, which is ironic, not something you often get with Spiritualized, so very produced. But yeah, I just really adore those. I think that's lovely. Well, of course, thanks once again to Mark. Looking forward to a final part of a chat with him soon. But until then, we've been Spacemen Pod. Thanks for coming.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.